THA Talks, for free thought and open minds.
And for freedom of speech.
Hello, I'm Paul Obitelli and welcome to another edition of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK. Our talks include news, conspiracies, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion and much more. If you'd like to check out our full archive, just go to www.thatalks.com to listen to or to download all our free content. And if there's anyone who'd like to contact us or give us some feedback, maybe you'd like to recommend a guest for the show, you can email us info@thatalks.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and many other podcast directories out there. Hello, welcome back to THA Talks. We're going to get another one straight out for you today. Obviously, because of the lockdown with coronavirus around the UK and across Europe, America, and all over the place. Obviously, there's a lot of people with some time to listen to podcasts, so I've got time to start making them, and I'm going to take advantage of the time to knock a few shows out during this period. We're going to be welcoming back founder of Stellium Astrology, Stefanie James. Some of you who've listened to the show for a while remember Stefanie coming on the show quite a bit with Shana. A couple years back, so I'm looking forward to catching up with her because she has actually got some very interesting work that ties in to this coronavirus thing. And obviously, when you talk about this stuff, it's always interesting when predictions touch on something and seem to come very true. So we're going to be touching on that. And without any further ado, Stefanie, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Paul.
Well, it's been I think it's been a couple years now, hasn't it?
Oh, it's been ages. Yeah, I haven't been on the show for a while.
Yeah, it's kind of. I will hold my hands up and say I've been a bit slow the last year or so, maybe more than that. Just not putting as many shows as I want, but because other things take over. But I've kept it going, and we've had some interesting guests of late. And I thought, well, we spoke a couple weeks or was it a week ago now, and. Turns out some of your work has actually been kicking ass again, as we already found it out in previous shows. And of course, today we're all very alarmed and worried about this coronavirus that's out there, and as well as the political things all going around it. And we've all got different opinions on that. I've covered a couple shows on it already that people can check out, and a couple perspectives there. Whereas what I'd like you to do is just explain where your work came into this, because obviously you've touched on something that has been quite interesting and has unfolded as you pretty much predicted it. So the floor is yours. How did that one start?
Well, it's interesting. I basically, as you know, I came on the show and I did some stuff about, I'm an astrologer, so I came on and talked about a few astrological bits and bobs. And actually, I'm just trying to cast my mind back, and I think the last time I was on THA was around the time that Trump and Hillary Clinton were battling it out for presidency.
That's right, yeah. It goes quick this time, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a long time ago now. But yeah, so, and also sort of around that whole Brexit time as well. So, basically I ended up sort of going off and doing a little bit of my own kind of research, but I kind of wanted to go, I was going to India to do a talk, and I wanted to do something really interesting, and I racked my brains trying to think about what I could do. And then it just dawned on me, there's a Saturn-Pluto conjunction coming up, which this occurred on the 22nd, on the 22nd degree of Capricorn on the 12th of January this year. So very close to your birthday, actually, Paul, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, basically, and my birthday too, actually, because I'm also a Capricorn.
Capricorns, we kick ass.
But yeah, basically, this conjunction is quite, when I say quite rare, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, I think it occurs about once every, I think it's like 20, is it 29 years, or I'm trying to think now exactly the time period, and I've left my little books in the other room, annoyingly. But basically, it's not that common, but it's not that uncommon.
So what you're talking about is something that's quite special. It's not like something that you'll pick up on every other month or week. It's quite you picked on something that's quite potent in the whole scheme of things. Yeah.
Basically, if you think about the planets moving around, the moon takes a month to go around the whole zodiac. So that is just like a monthly cycle, which happens to be connected to the feminine monthly cycle. Yeah. And as you move out through the planets, so Venus takes about a year, Mercury takes about a year to go around the Sun, Mars takes approximately 2 years, and then you get to Jupiter, which takes 12. Saturn takes approximately 28 years, 27, 28. And then you get into the outer planets, and I think that Uranus takes, how long does Uranus take? 84 years to go around the whole zodiac.
Right.
And then Neptune takes another, probably got it down, all my notes in here, but they basically, it takes a long time for them all to do a full orbit. But the planets, they interplay with each other, and they sometimes, meet up. So when, Mars and Venus meet up, that happens about once a year. And that's not such a big deal. But when you've got like big players like Pluto, which is kind of the god of the underworld in mythology, meeting up with Saturn, who kind of symbolises death and decay and aging and time, these two planets coming together are quite a big deal and not something to ever really look forward to. But what made this particular Saturn-Pluto conjunction interesting was the fact that Jupiter was also going to be in Capricorn. And for those three planets to be in Capricorn together at the time of the conjunction, that happens once approximately every 735 years, approximately. So actually, that is a really big deal. And most astrologers, if you spoke to them and you said, what's going to happen in 2020, a lot of them would have said, big stuff. Yeah, it's like... Any astrologer who kind of looks at mundane cycles, the larger cycles, would have been able to tell you that something huge was going to happen. Definitely, but they may not have been able to.
Once in a lifetime kind of thing.
Yeah, once in a few lifetimes, actually, in this case.
Yeah.
So basically, so I went to India to do a talk, and I thought, well, it'll be really interesting because I know that Saturn Pluto's coming up, but also around the same degree, back in the 90s, we had another conjunction that was a huge cycle that happens once every 200 and I think every 270 odd years. I've got it all written down, so I'll touch on it later. And that was the Uranus-Neptune conjunction, which happened to coincide with loads of cool stuff going on in the 90s. The music scene was amazing, as you know. And it was a very creative, interesting time, very innovative. The internet came along. And all that sort of stuff. So there was a lot of stuff that happened in the 90s, and I thought, well, obviously, two...
Just to interject there, it's on an artistic level, I think I recognise it. I mean, we can always say the music we grew up on with Special, but I think something about the grunge, that 90s thing, it's almost like the industry kind of lost control over everything, and it was just wear what you like, dress yourself down, and just really it gave bands a chance to be really experimental. So I just wanted to throw it in because I thought that was quite interesting when you said about the creativity. I think definitely music then it kind of took a big swing away from the norm, and something the grunge movement really shattered something in that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's what really this conjunction in 1993, this Uranus-Neptune conjunction. Yeah. It happened on my sun, so it played out really in a huge way in my own life when I was younger. Yeah. And so when you're an astrologer, if something happens around your sun, you're often able to shine a light on it for other people. So I thought, okay, well, we've had this amazing period in time that we've all lived through already, where we've suddenly had this technological leap that has never been seen in the past, and we're living in this digital information age that was just not accessible previously. We're living in the land of these amazing devices that can give you everything you need at the press of a button, basically. And now you don't even have to touch a button; you just have to ask Siri or Alexa. Yeah. So this stuff that's going on was incredible enough as it is. All kicked off sort of around 1993, but it feeds in now because Saturn and Pluto are sitting in Capricorn, and the conjunction happened only a few degrees away. This Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So I just thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see if we can make some connections and see what happened then, what we could maybe look at what's going to happen in the future. And, I researched a lot of different areas, and it just so happens that they tend to be all the areas that seem to be highlighted in a big way for us at the moment. So I mean, I can continue talking if you like, and go into more detail.
Definitely, please, because it's fascinating. Just hearing about the fact that there's something so major. If people that are really interested in astrology, that in itself is just interesting. That we're talking about this moment is actually a very potent moment. So that in itself is intriguing. But obviously, with what's been going on, it makes it even more intriguing. So yeah, please go on and explain it more.
Okay, I will do. So. Basically, I did this little talk, and it started to grow. Every time I did the talk again, it kind of got bigger and bigger. So when I started off in India, it tended to be more around the Uranus-Neptune conjunction and looking back over what's happened and what's going on now with the people that were born in the 90s, sort of like the early 90s. And then it started to sort of snowball, and it just got bigger and bigger, and I started finding more and more bits of information.
Yeah.
So I've actually got my slides in front of me, so I can have a little, refresh my memory where I need to. But there were a few things that were really, really interesting about that whole period in time. If you speak to certain people, different sort of schools of thought, one of them tends to think that around the early 90s, or around that period actually, not just 93, there was a window where all these indigo children came into existence. And whether or not you're kind of into that idea of indigo children, it doesn't really matter, because for me, the idea of an indigo child wasn't necessarily about having, this magical spiritual message. It was more about looking at what that symbolised on this planet through people.
Right.
And what I was seeing was around 1988, I think autism spectrum disorder got put into the, the diagnosis book. What do they call it?
I know what you mean. Yeah, I can't think of the word myself. But
got it here.
What the term is?
Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM.
DSM, right? Okay.
So yes, in 1988, Uranus and Neptune came together. They got close enough to each other that actually they started communicating with each other in a way that it would bring on. We call it the electional period in astrology, but actually it's almost like they got close enough they could hear each other and say, right, like, how are we going to start working together? And also around that time, something happened to Pluto, our planet that's not a planet anymore. And what happened is Pluto reached perihelion between 1979 to 1999. And what that means is Pluto was at its closest point to the Sun, and because of its abnormal elliptical orbit, which is slightly skewed, it actually crosses Neptune's path, which means that Neptune was further out than Pluto. So Neptune was the furthest planet from the Sun for about 20 years, from 1979 to 1999. So that's already weird planetary weather that Pluto would actually be closer. And just to let you know how frequent that is, the next time that will happen is in the year 2227. So that's also something that really doesn't happen very frequently at all. So that was already happening. Basically, during that period, that's when they kind of said that these indigo children kind of started appearing, these people with gifts, some of these psychic children and children that were able to do things that other children perhaps weren't, or they had, those kind of Greta Thunbergs that are kind of ahead of their generations with, they're just old souls coming back into.
There's been a few of them that thought they've had past lives before, and youngsters that have recognised a house and stuff, and then they found out that what they recognised about there was actually a history. I mean, people can obviously be sceptical, but it's certainly interesting to research and think about it. Normally, there's no smoke without fire, is there? But there's a lot of people running with conspiracies. But it's interesting. I urge people to go and check it out because it's an interesting thing. But sorry, carry on.
No, you're welcome. So basically, with the idea of indigo children, I kind of in my head just always kind of associated some of the traits of indigo children with kind of autistic traits. So I looked into, autism diagnosis, and like I said previously, they added autism spectrum disorder to the DSM back in 1987. And I Googled, I started Googling it to see, how frequently, it was being, the word was, sometimes when you Google a term and it comes up with a little diagram, a little graph to show you how often the words are used over time.
Oh, yeah.
And it just seemed to exponentially grow from about, the end of the 80s. So it's almost as though during that time, autism became a very commonly known sort of, I don't know what you call it, they call it a disorder, don't they?
Yeah.
And so I found it interesting because I thought, well, there was an awful lot of connections between autism and people who had problems with the vaccinations that they were having back in, the MMR jabs and stuff like that.
Yeah, Italian court, I think, ruled something about that it proved to cause autism in at least one case. I think there was something like that.
So I looked at my research. I don't think I found that source that you're referring to, but what I discovered was that people were concerned about the amount of vaccines that they were putting in at any one time. And also because some of the vaccines that you can inject are what they call quadrivalent, which means that they've got 4 different vaccines that are going in that cover a variety, not just MMR, but when you take a child for their 8-week jabs, they have one injection that's got 4 different things in it that I think immunise against pneumonia and these different things basically, and they have 4 different, so they'll have 2 jabs in one leg, 1 jab in another, and then they have an oral solution, and all of these different things are like loads of different illnesses that they're injecting them for: Hib, meningitis B, polio, whooping cough, measles, all of these different things that they just put all in one go. And so there was either an argument between the actual MMR jab causing autism or the fact that they were giving them all of these different things all in one hit, and it was just too much. You're flooding the body with all these different kind of viruses. So I was looking into that, and I thought, well, that's a really interesting thing that we're, I was convinced that there was something to do with vaccines was going to be part of whatever was going on with Saturn Pluto, because the other thing that I found, the other connections that I was making was in 1993 when Uranus and Neptune met by conjunction. This happened 3 times in 1993. It happened on the 2nd of February 1993, the 20th of August, and also the 24th of October. So each time they met, the first time they met at 19 Capricorn, and then the next 2 times they met at 18 Capricorn. So not too far away from 22 degrees Capricorn, where the Saturn-Pluto conjunction was going to occur earlier in January. And I think it kind of spurred on a rapid expansion of consciousness of humanity. And in the different areas that I thought that we would see big changes would be in education and wellness, the NHS and in healthcare, so basically public health, the government, information sharing, and commerce. So those were the kind of areas I really thought that we were going to see big changes.
Yeah.
It's so weird because I haven't actually looked over this talk since I've last played around with it and added bits and bobs to it. So that was probably about, 6 months ago or something, and I just can't quite get my head around some of the things that I've kind of researched and actually how close it was. So basically, science and art being brought together, I thought would be one thing. I definitely thought that we're seeing a connection between the kind of scientific theory and spirituality kind of blending to an extent. We're starting to get to a point where the NHS are encouraging people to meditate and to do yoga and do things that the ancients have known for years are really good for the mental state and well-being, which actually seems to govern more than anything. If you're not mentally well, then you can any number of symptoms can be brought on through perhaps obsessing over illnesses or perhaps not looking after yourself properly. So they understand now that mental wellness and
stress as well. I think they now know that stress does affect weaken your immune system, literally physically. If you're stressed all the time, it has a physical effect on your body and weakens your immune system. So exactly. So and we all know about that now because we're all in a state of stress and anxiety. I think I'm fluctuating from
feeling okay about it, feeling like I'm okay and I'm coping, and then the next day I'm having a meltdown. Like, it's really hard to feel grounded at all. And you know, the things that are getting me through are things like doing yoga, doing a bit of meditation, a little bit of hypnosis, you know, things like that actually get me out of what's going on and into my center, basically.
Yeah, and take control of your mind, isn't it? You know, because there's so much pulling at your mind, you know, claim it back, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, this conjunction with Uranus Neptune happening in Capricorn, I saw it as science and art being brought together, dreams and visions becoming a reality. We changed our expectations. It was a kind of rewriting of the rule book, and a type of escapism entered our regular life, bringing us into a type of virtual reality. And we also saw an awful lot of independent broadcasting coming in at that time. So if you look at things like, you know, your podcast, for example, and, you know, the amount of podcasts that are out there now, and people on YouTube with their YouTube channels now, like Joe Rogan, for example, when I come home, I don't put TV on, I'll put on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and we've now got TVs that are actual, you can just literally smart TVs where you can program what you want to watch. So now I don't ever put on like terrestrial TV anymore. I literally come home and I've got my yoga channel, got my Joe Rogan channel. You know, it's like, this is where we've literally been able to sort of like craft what we want to see.
You see through the media so much now when you do that. Sorry, it's basically, it's like what you say, because I watch so much of just independent bits and pieces and stuff that I choose to listen to. Then when occasionally I flick through or I see a Sky News or BBC video, it just looks so programmed and stiff, and it's just, you can see that they're just, the presenters, they're like blinking a lot, and it's just lying. It's just constant lies all the time.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, so it's definitely, that's a good, although they're trying to change it, obviously, YouTube, Twitter, they're all basically slowly trying to creep back in, you know, so that that mainstream has control of that, whether they can do it or not effectively, but we'll see, but they're certainly trying now.
Well, I wonder, part of me wonders if part of what is going on at the moment is a way of trying to take down independent businesses in a way to, you know, like making it impossible to make any money out of anything. Some people are still going to be able to do well out of this, you know, like there's a yoga channel that I follow on YouTube and she's just doing amazingly. And while everybody's here at home self-isolating, if they want to exercise, they're going to switch on YouTube, or, you know, there's people trying to, you know, do their own sort of working from home type thing. But I think some things are doing okay, but I do think they're trying to close down on it, and they definitely are. But what is interesting is that Tim Berners-Lee, who is our man who, our British guy who came up with the concept of the internet, he basically did this. I think, let me find my slide for him. So, you know, the World Wide Web began at CERN, basically. They created it because they wanted to share scientific research. Basically, what he said was, I don't know if I should bother reading the entire quote, but he said, "I just had to take the hypertext idea and connect it to transmission control protocol and the domain name system ideas, and ta-da, the World Wide Web. It was a step of generalizing, going to a higher level of abstraction, which is very Uranian, thinking about all the documentation systems out there and being possibly part of a larger imaginary documentation system." And that's Neptune in Capricorn. It's like bringing this, it's being able to conceptualize and go bigger and basically bringing things together. And this is what he was able to do. Interestingly, his chart feeds into it all. But basically the internet, I think that was basically implemented. I think he came up with it in about 1991. And through 1993, that's when it really started to get developed. And by the end of the 90s, we were all sending emails. You know, I was at school sending emails and I was like, I don't really understand where this is going. I literally don't understand where this email is going. You know, I know someone can open it on the other end, but what happens in between? I couldn't get my head around it. But it was, you know, rolled out in the 90s at school. You know, and that's what he did. That was his gift to humanity. And actually, his gift to humanity is absolutely key to what we're doing now when we're in social isolation. It's making society is functioning. Why are we still getting information immediately to our mobile phones through his technology that he developed? Initially for scientific research, but it's benefited the entire globe, basically. So just fascinating that, and his chart feeds into this Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn, Pluto, and in fact he has got a Uranus, Neptune square in his chart, and a lot of people who were key at these times of developing some of the technologies and the things that we're relying on today have these kind of big mundane aspects in their charts. Sorry, phone going off for some reason. Let me just grab that. I don't know how to switch it off, and it's probably going to go off again in a little while, so I'll have to keep an eye on it. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So basically, the internet is obviously really key. And if we look, I started sort of looking into people that were famous and trying to work out, well, who are these people that are really top of their field now and doing what they're doing? And I realised that basically it's all reality TV stars and, YouTube celebrities, Instagram celebrities. And I realised that it's literally changed the internet and this period in time, this Saturn, this Uranus-Neptune conjunction, which has basically created this creative independent broadcasting boom, basically has created a lot of celebrities that if you asked most people walking down the road who were sort of in their 40s, they wouldn't have a clue who you were talking about. 40s and above, they wouldn't have a clue, but the younger generations know all these people, and particularly someone like PewDiePie, for example.
He's huge.
He's basically absolutely smashed YouTube. the amount of I can't even think now how many he's basically got now, followers. But either way, so back to some of my research around the time of the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. Also, computer generated imagery started getting used in films. So CGI, it was used for the first time in cinema in Terminator 2. And they also used it in things like Beauty and the Beast, which just had a revamp not that long ago, while I was doing this talk, actually. But in 1993, Jurassic Park came out, and you had basically just they came on leaps and bounds in cinema. And George Lucas said that a major gap has been crossed, and things will never be the same again. So, to think about that time in history and just quite how much of an impact it's had. And if you think about now, every single film we watch is literally CGI. Everything's CGI. Big time. And the connection I made there was that actually there's a place, I think it's in Pasadena, in California, and basically they employ, it's called Exceptional Minds, and it's a charity for children with autism. Say children, they're young people with autism who are particularly good at focusing and being able to develop, computer technology. So if you're watching something like Game of Thrones, for example, when that someone left their coffee cup and it got accidentally left into the scene and it actually got aired.
I haven't heard of that, no, but...
Oh, really?
Sounds
yeah,
funny.
It's like in one of the last episodes or something, they were like, oh my God, somebody left a Starbucks mug in Game of Thrones. But basically, these people in Exceptional Minds would be able to go in, find that mug or anything, if somebody had left a watch on or something, and they could literally get rid of it. They're like wizards, like, technical wizards. And basically, the Exceptional Minds school motto is creating the future one frame at a time. And it requires a kind of vision and a perfection and attention to detail, which, you tend to find that there are some people with a particular type of autism have this ability to focus in that way. So there I was back with this autism thing, and then I got back to the vaccines thinking, well, how does this connect? And basically, I started looking at Saturn and Pluto and looking forward and looking at where we are now. And by the way, just so you know, those Exceptional Minds, the people that work there, those schools, they worked on so many Marvel films. They worked on, I think I had a list of the schools, the things, Infinity War, Black Panther, Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom.
What do you mean, doing the graphics for them and stuff?
Yeah, doing not necessarily everything, but they've done bits and bobs with it. So I was just finding this connection where actually autism, which seemed to boom during the Uranus-Neptune conjunction, is now becoming something that fits into our reality and allows us to escape. So suddenly we find ourselves in this world where technology, initially when the autistic children, suddenly there was loads of people getting diagnosed with it, and they were good at looking at screens, but they weren't too good at focusing on a book. And they're particularly hyper focus on certain areas of interest, and often get lost in fantasy realms and things like that, where they want to do their own thing, and they get very, very locked in. A lot of people who do astrology and get very interested in astrology tend to be have those kind of autistic tendencies. Like they get very obsessed with particular things. You could maybe say perhaps I've even got it a little bit, but it's one of those things where it requires what they do with these films and CGIs and computer programming, anything really heavily technological requires that kind of undivided obsessive attention to detail, which just brought me back to that Exceptional Mind School and looking at how they seem to be creating this reality for us where we're able to sort of step out and lose ourselves into this new dimension. And that's when I started getting into this whole new dimension aspect. And having seen that Uranus and Neptune coming together was already a big enough deal. It doesn't happen very often. But also for Pluto to be at its perihelion at that same time, which happens, I can't even remember what I said now, something like 281 years or something. I can't remember exactly the period of time, but it's so rare that I thought that this really is the dawning of a new dimension, and the internet was born at that point. So this was an age of information. It's a technological dimension that we're stepping into. So to bring it up to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and it's in Capricorn as well. So just to remind you that Capricorn is, very much about the ruling class's authority. Can be to do with the royal family as well, because it's very royal. It's very tradition focused. It's something that I knew that something was going to be going on with the government. I knew something was going to be going on with the way things have always been done, and that it wasn't going to continue that way. Yeah. And Saturn and Pluto coming together, you can say that they're kind of the destroyer planets in a sense. Saturn can break things down, and Pluto can literally take a wrecking ball to something, and you're left with perhaps like the one structure within that's holding everything together, and that's the one thing still standing. And Pluto will leave that last final bit standing, so you can rebuild everything around it. And Saturn, literally, it's the planet of boundaries, it's the planet of rules. It basically takes things, those two together are periods of, when you put them together, great austerity, basically. Yeah. So it can be extremely challenging to, I'm not saying we haven't had generations live through it, but, it's always going to be a challenging time, and it will take a few years to really get through it. And another great phrase I have for Saturn Pluto is, with great power comes great responsibility. Absolutely, yeah. And that really does sort of sum Saturn Pluto up. It's about power and control. And also some other things you could say about Saturn Pluto, which, think about this, since we've just had the conjunction on the 12th of January. There's it's associated with slavery, fear and terror, the two planets of fear and terror, being deadly serious, power and control, doing what's right for the greater good. And here's a little thing that I put here. It's an opportunity to start fresh with the lessons of the past and a no-nonsense attitude about future plans. So when you're looking at things like that, it didn't paint a particularly exciting image of the future for me. And then I started getting into all sorts of things. I started looking at the way that technology's been going with augmented reality, with things like Pokemon Go. Let's have a look. What have I got here? Pluto. Oh, well, when Pluto went into Capricorn, yes, we had the economic crash in 2008. So that's kind of a way of looking at how is a planet going to be taking things back, stripping it back to the bare elements, basically, and letting you rebuild it. As soon as Pluto went into Capricorn, we had the crash, and it was a recession for so long. I feel like we were still in that recession, actually, don't you?
Yeah, it was kind of strange because it didn't feel like, oh, we're out of it. It's just all of a sudden we were supposedly out of it, and it just enabled the government pretty much to do what they wanted. That was a thing. Yeah, basically. And what was really difficult was what was really difficult for me was recently when they said about
oh, we've just pulled out. I swear, maybe I've got the number wrong, but I swear that they said that they were pulling £24 billion out of their budget and putting it into the NHS. And I thought, £24 billion. You've had £24 billion. You've got more than £24 billion. Yeah. You've had it this whole time. Yeah. Been pinching your pennies as far as the healthcare system is concerned in this country. And you literally, as soon as a global pandemic gets declared, that's it. You whip out all that money and say, here you go, have it, doctors and nurses. And
that's it, yeah.
We'll build a hospital in 2 weeks.
It seems strange. I mean, hopefully we're not going to live to see the repercussions too much of that, but it does kind of put it into perspective, doesn't it? You kind of think, the thing is, I think it's, what is money anyway? I think we're getting to the stage now, we think, well, where does it really all come from anyway? It's almost like the banks are the only ones that can just create it, and what gives them the rights just to create money from thin air? But
yeah. That's a whole nother conversation.
Oh yeah, that's another one.
It feels so relevant to basically all the research I did, because, as you know, I'm not somebody who tends to go down a typical train of thought.
Yeah.
Already I'm an astrologer, so I'm going to be doing stuff that's not widely accepted. But actually, I've always kind of looked into conspiracy theories and different perspectives of looking at what's actually going on. And so my research around this talk was drawing on loads of different alternative theories. And I just can't believe, I'm just looking at my slides now, and I cannot believe that I've got one here for public health, and I've actually got immunisations, vaccines, autism and herd immunity as one of my bullet points. Like, I actually used the words herd immunity, which is something that they decided to roll out in this country. Yeah. It's just freaking me out. I know that as an astrologer, you always get people come back and go, oh, that rang true to me. Yeah, that actually did happen. But when it's something as big as this, you kind of think, wow. But yeah, so actually, if we touch on public health, I actually also do have a square job, working in the NHS. And so I had a very interesting way of looking at my research, because I was already interested in this whole aspect of, vaccines. And I actually happened to start working in an area where I got to learn about vaccines for part of my job. And so it was quite an interesting thing. And I also started learning that there's such a thing right now called the long-term NHS plan, which is basically, I think it came in at around 2008. And most of the doctors that I've spoken to said that the NHS has changed beyond recognition since about 2008, which is when Pluto entered Capricorn. And just so you know, Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008. Saturn entered Capricorn in December 2017. And so basically, for Saturn goes through a sign, approximately it takes about 2.5 years to go through a sign, and it's just entered Aquarius literally last weekend. But all the while it was in Capricorn, and it will dip back into Capricorn, it's very serious. It forces us to look at things in a, we have to sort of stop being silly and put on our serious hats and start, looking at rules, the way things have been done, traditions. And it's very, if you look at the way the royal family is, it's almost like looking at, it's basically looking at like the Queen and Prince Charles. That's kind of very Saturn in Capricorn. And then you've got like Harry, for example, doing something very different and breaking away. And that's very kind of Aquarian or very Uranian. So, there's different ways of Saturn expressing itself. And it's just moved into Aquarius now. And we're starting to see a new way of life for the next, we say we're going to be socially isolating for a few, months or whatever. But how long is it really going to go on for? Because Saturn's just entered Aquarius, the sign of communities and social, like basically your social groups and people with common interests, finding your community. And we're all being encouraged to go to this very Aquarian online community. I don't know, we're definitely being encouraged to take a step over to, a more technological approach now, which I don't know if that suits the government more, if they were hoping to push us in that direction at some point, but I just can't get over how Orwellian this all feels right now. Yeah,
it is worrying, because you kind of think, let's just see this through, do what they say and see it through, and you kind of worry that when we come through the other side, it's like, right, you can do that, but you can't do this, you can't do that, And I think we've got to be wise to that. You know, we've got to really watch this and think, look, the only reason we're doing this is because it's an agenda to deal or slow down the spread of this virus. Nothing else. This is we're not doing this for no other reason. And we've all collectively got to watch that. I think that's, if we don't, you get too many people that are like just tunnel vision. Oh, you know, get rid of the virus, get rid of the virus. It's almost like, I mean, I think someone on Facebook today left something that was quite amusing. Posted an article saying government says jump off bridge, you know, and they had a picture of this person jumping off a bridge. I think you've got to keep your eye on the ball here, people, because there's no point just listening to everything the government says. We already know that lots and lots and lots and lots of these numbers are of people dying with coronavirus. So therefore, if you die of cancer, if you know, so we know there's while this is going on, there's a virus. We also know there's a political agenda. So you're dealing with two things here, I'm afraid. That's the way I see it. We're dealing with obviously a nasty virus, but we're also dealing with nasty people that want to take away your freedom. And we've got to balance that. You know, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well because they're diagnosing people and saying that they're dying from coronavirus. Now, you know I work for the NHS, but I'm not medically trained, so I'm not trying to say that I know all about this.
Yeah.
But, you know, if somebody has got cancer or if they've got some kind of the underlying health condition that makes them particularly vulnerable anyway, if they pass away from corona, like if coronavirus, they happen to have that as well, and that's something that, you know, adds to the issues and puts them under tremendous pressure, and then they pass away.
Yeah,
they are just putting it all down. They're chalking it all down to coronavirus. So the statistics look enormous.
Yeah, I think the New York Times. I flicked through it. I saw an article from the New York Times saying numbers could be less than originally thought. You know, and I was kind of right. Here we go. You know, so yeah, it's also David was on the show with me yesterday, and he said he thinks it's some kind of kind of dress rehearsal. It's sort of like, let's see how much we can get away with, how much we can keep them under heel, so to speak. You know. But yeah, so basically, I mean, what you're saying, you with this work you're doing, you more or less predicted in your head or in your you know, what you've gathered from the positioning of the stars and stuff. That did you feel that there was going to be a virus come out that was going to be like manufactured, or did you think it was a natural virus? What's your views on that?
Right, I actually think that the damage that was done in the 80s towards vaccines in general has caused a lack of herd immunity anyway.
Right.
So I don't know about necessarily whether it's manufactured. I think that this is all the stuff that will unveil. And what my approach is with what I'm doing is I'm looking at what happened previously. I always say hindsight is the best tool with astrology. You can look back and see what happened and then look at your current environment and then think what's probable. And what I was looking at, working where I did in the NHS, where I do in the NHS, one of the things that started to really freak me out last year was we started to have a lot of measles outbreaks. And it got to the point where it was actually not terribly serious, but we had to be a bit more cautious. And I thought, wow, we're getting towards Saturn Pluto, and suddenly the MMR jab, which I know was the reputation of that vaccine was damaged pretty much irreparably back in the sort of like the late 80s, early 90s, when people started saying, oh, it's connected to autism. You know, my child had this jab and suddenly they're autistic. You know, I don't know whether or not there's every source I found has kind of poo-pooed that and said, no, the research that they did on that, you know, they did a 6 case studies, and the doctor that, I think, what's it say here, his name was Dr. Andrew Wakefield, he did 6 studies and said, yeah, there's a connection. And, you know, to do real case studies, you can't just do it on 6 patients. It has to be done on at least a few hundred. Do you know what I mean? To really see, to get a realistic idea of whether or not, you know, there is actually a connection. But that's what my research, where I found my information anyway. So whether there's something out there that conflicts with what I've just said, it's, you know, I'd love it if you could share that with me, because I would be really interested to read it. But I'm not here to say whether or not there is a connection between that. The connection for me is more about the fact that the people put these two together and what happened as a result of that. So during that time when that conjunction was forming, when we had that massive transit of Pluto being at perihelion in this enormous planetary concoction, which was just so rare, occurring then. And then I was there finding out that suddenly there's measles breaking out in different pockets of the country. Oh my God. So actually, it's highly likely. I personally thought we were going to have a massive measles thing or something. And I also didn't think it was going to be global. I thought I didn't. Obviously, as a mundane cycle was big as one that comes around every 735 years, and it includes Jupiter, the planet of global affairs.
Yeah.
Of course, I should have realised that if we're going to have some kind of outbreak, then it could go global. But I didn't make that connection. My connection was, maybe it's going to be measles, and how bad is it going to get? And
right.
I was watching. I studied a course with the Open University. Well, it was a Future Learn course, which you can do for free, and they did one last year on vaccines. So I studied that, and I watched it, and I was watching all these horrific videos of children with whooping cough, and thinking, oh my God, this is going to be horrific if something like this happens. So I didn't necessarily predict that it was going to be coronavirus, but I knew that something to do with public health was going to be affected. I thought it was going to have something to do with desperately needing vaccines, and I also thought that the economy may collapse as a result of it, because the Saturn and Pluto coming together at the same time of that conjunction, Mercury was there, which rules commerce. It was like very tight. I think Saturn and Pluto were 22 degrees. I think Mercury was 21 degrees. And I think that the sun was, I can't remember if the sun was at 22 degrees as well. It basically 4 planets in this crazy stellium in Capricorn. So rare. And then Jupiter was at about 3 or 4 degrees, something like that as well. So it was close by, but it wasn't quite bunched in with the rest of that stellium. And it was just such an unusual arrangement of planets to happen in this lifetime that we'll never really see again, ever. Well, we won't see that again for another 735 years. So basically, I knew it was going to be big, but I just couldn't. Even though you kind of expect something big to happen, when it actually happens, you just can't believe it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
So let's say, I mean, you came to that conclusion with your work with astrology. If you were now to look at that and think, right, here we are, this is the position we're in. How would you take it from here? Where do we? Is the future bleak, or is there something we can look at and think, well, hang on, if we do this, we've got hope? And do you see any positivity that could come from it, or is there certain things we need to start doing? From what you see.
Well, I think that as a species, humanity has been through these cycles previously, and we've got over it, and we've continued. So there's hope there to start with. And as I've said, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction does happen. I think it happened in 1917, or I think it was 1917. I think it happened during the First World War. I think it kicked off the First World War, and then there was a flu pandemic after that. I don't necessarily think it was global. I think it was a European pandemic, wasn't it? And then we had I think in 1940. Was it 1942? I think. I'm sorry, I'm not really great with the dates at the moment. I haven't got all my stuff in front of me. We had another Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And then I think, again, we had, I think that coincided with the Second World War. And then we had, after that, I think, I'm not missing one out, am I? In 1982, we had another Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and that was in the final degree of Libra. So the one in the 40s was in Leo. The one in the early in the 1917, I can't remember where that was now, but the one in 1981 was in Libra, and that came along with the whole AIDS thing. So it's going to be different each time, because if you think of the planets, they're kind of like jigsaw pieces that they kind of fit together. It's like a kind of weird Rubik's cube that every time it fits together, it's slightly organised in a different way. Yeah. So it flips out a different script each time. So you can find connections, but you won't necessarily find the exact same scenario. But But yeah, we've got through these things and we learn from them, and our technology grows and our understanding of ourselves, humanity as a species, and also our bodies, our chemical makeup, all of that sort of stuff. We basically develop and grow from these things. And what I will say about Saturn and Pluto coming together is that, they are kind of like destroyers. And I was at an astrology talk a few years back where we were talking about this, because astrologers have been talking about this for years. Like this period in time, that date, the first coronavirus confirmed death in China that they're telling us about happened on the 11th of January, and this conjunction happened on the 12th. So it's not like astrologers haven't been focusing on this period of time and like brainstorming and saying what's going to happen. But actually, somebody called it the battle of the clash of the titans. It's like the gods going to war right now. Saturn and Pluto together, Jupiter's involved. So like that's kind of like Zeus, and you've got like Odin and Hades, and then you've got Uranus from Taurus, another Earth sign. So all of this stuff happening in Earth is about reality and about the world we've built, the structures we've got in place. At the moment, all of our structures, our daily structure, even down to what we do on a daily basis, like, I like working for the NHS. I am still going to work, so I've got that ability to get out and have a normal life that other people haven't got. So the people that aren't going out are even struggling to get up and just get dressed some days. That daily routine, that daily structure is gone.
There'll be a lot of depression, wouldn't there? There'll be a lot of depression after this, people suffering, because it's difficult to have them get up and go when you're held down like that. I think
it's traumatic as well. I wonder if, to be honest with you, as time goes by, there's more and more people that are in some way close to me. I'm so lucky, touch wood, that at the moment, none of my loved ones have really been affected. But I know a few people through, some of my friends and that who have been affected by this, and some of them have been affected in a really bad way. Yeah. And for us to lose, I saw something on Facebook about another astrologer, I can't remember who it was, posted up and said, this Saturn-Pluto conjunction, what we're seeing playing out in humanity right now is a collective death anxiety scenario. And it's true. We're all being tested and being pushed to the very brink of our sanity through this deep plummeting into the deepest, darkest fears of each individual, but on a collective level we all experience it together.
It's kind of strange. It's kind of strange, sorry, because it's like it's just a power struggle. We've been going in a direction where life has been generally getting better because we've got more means to make life more comfortable and stuff, but it means that the power for control is going to have to move, because you know what I mean. So it's like the New World Order. The New World Order is about the way to restructure the new world so that those who are in charge of this one keeps control of the new one, I guess. And perhaps that's what we're seeing. And I'd like to think that there's enough people out there that could snap out of it and say, no, we're going to go the way we all want to go, not the way you just want to go. It's whether we'll all wake up in time to do that,
Interesting, one of my little slides that I had was called the New World Order. And I had the European Union, the United Nations and NATO on there. I didn't put the World Health on there or anything like that. I think that's on a few slides later on. Yeah. And just out of interest for you, that film, Zeitgeist, which kind of introduced a lot of people to the alternative ideas, actually came out in 2007, which was just before Pluto entered Capricorn. It was just the final degrees of Sagittarius, which is a sign about teaching and broadcasting and reaching out. So it's interesting that that seed was sown, and I think the film went viral in about 2008. Interestingly, when Pluto entered Capricorn, and
although
kind of set.
I've got my reservations about that. It's my opinion. It's got a bit of a Pied Piper thing to it, because it's got a very pro-communist feel to it, which is ultimately what the New World Order is. It's a global communist state, and it's kind of pull the people that are already aware and waking up and lead them basically to the New World Order in a way like that. I don't know whether the bloke who created it intentionally done that, but I find a lot of these people who are I'm waking up to the New World Order without knowing it, they're actually supporting what the fundamentals of it really is. But anyway, but I understand your point. The time it came out and so on.
What's interesting about it, more than what the film is actually, whether it's propaganda or not, is the fact that something like that came out, which triggered humanity into thinking differently.
Well, it could be that the Illuminati, or whoever you want to call them, the Illuminati is just a nickname for them as far as I'm concerned. It's just a slang word for it. But they could know what you're talking about now. They could be very knowledgeable about this stuff themselves. So that's why they've put that out there at that time, because they prefer them to put something and to really throw it around, rather than something naturally come from our consciousness and hit the internet. Do you know what I mean? They could be one step ahead of it in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's interesting, but it's more about the fact that, we kind of woke up to a different level of, Pluto is a planet of trust, and it can be about corruption. If you put Pluto in Capricorn, it can be looking at like where we're corrupted. And since it's been in Capricorn, so much stuff has happened. Like, we've had the housing crash, but we also had all of that oputry stuff, which is what I came and spoke about before. Like the paedophile rings that were operating, which, under everybody's noses, and people being allowed to get away with that kind of stuff. So it's about kind of really questioning the power structure and whether or not the people who are in charge are actually trustworthy, and whether they're abusing that power or using it for the greater good. And that's what Pluto is doing in Capricorn. It's bulldozing everything, stripping it back to the core, to its like one standing structure within, and it's asking us to rebuild around that remaining structure and do it the way that it works now, that in the best possible way we can now. And it's not going to come back to Capricorn. Pluto's not coming back to Capricorn in our lifetimes. None of us will be alive to see when it's back there again. So it's still working through there at the moment, and will be for a few more years. But it's just, it doesn't take any prisoners, basically. It's a heavy transit. All of the Capricorns that I know, anyone with sun in Capricorn, will have been really going through some deep personal transformations over the past few years, basically since 2008. You can't lie to yourself, and life can't be the same again. Once you've had that transit, you're a different person, and you're a more truthful, authentic version of yourself. You can't lie to yourself under this kind of transit, and that's what's happening to us with something like this huge transit that's happening, which is affecting us, humanity, on a collective level, on a global level. We're all being asked the same thing. Do we trust the way that things are being done now? Are we using our skills, our abilities? Are we being good human beings, or are we, trying to overpower other people in our actions, in what we're doing? The whole panic buying toilet roll is so symbolic of Pluto, because Pluto is the planetary toilet. It's the place. It really is. It's the underworld. It's the kind of things that resonate with a Pluto type of job is, somebody that delves into the depths of, Hannibal Lecter, getting into somebody's mind. Like people who do like waste refuse and recycling. It's like taking something that's no longer working and turning it into something, upcycling, turning it into something useful, getting into somebody's mind, psychotherapy, working with some of the stuff that they're, sabotaging themselves, or they've had some really awful experiences and traumas that they need to work through, and helping them to empower themselves to go out there and be a better version of themselves. Pluto really does take the dregs of, basically the nastiest, most disgusting crap, and helping you to turn it into something positive. And basically, what did we all do when we found out this coronavirus was going on? People went out and panic bought toilet paper, the stuff you wipe your ass with, your excrement. They're shitting themselves. It's so symbolic. And so this is Pluto in Capricorn. Saturn comes along and makes whatever's going on with Pluto a reality. We're starting to feel the deep fear, this anxiety that has reached out across the globe. It's humbled people. We suddenly realise the importance of our family and our loved ones. We realise that, what was it I saw somewhere? Someone said, it doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter how much money you've made. It doesn't matter, how powerful you think you are. Right now, the people keeping this society going are the key workers. Those are the most important jobs, and unfortunately they're the ones that aren't paid very well either. It's just one of those things where you suddenly realise it's stripped right back, basically. But to answer your question, about does the future look bright? I don't have the answers, but what I do think is that it will improve. I don't know how quickly it's going to improve. I think that there is going to be a lot more of this following the rules. Now Saturn's in Aquarius, as I mentioned, it went in last Sunday. We are going to have to deal with Saturn being quite a heavy, no-nonsense kind of one of those people that goes around just bossing everybody else around kind of things, like you've got to do this, it's kind of like a civilian arrest kind of thing, when you can citizens arrest, when you can go out and you can say, right, that's it, I'm not a police officer, but you're not doing what you're told and I'm going to hold you until the police get here. That's kind of Saturn in Aquarius a bit. It's a bit of a one of those people that kind of a bit of a buzzkill really at a party, and unfortunately he's going to be there for about 2.5 years. He does dip back into Capricorn in a little while. I think it goes retrograde soon, and he dips back in a few months, and he's going to stay in the final degrees of Capricorn for a little bit longer, and then I think in the end of the year, I think in about December, he dips back out and goes into Aquarius again and meets Jupiter, which is a nice. Actually, Jupiter is considered a benefic, which is like a positive, finds meaning in things, understands, where we can grow from an experience. And he's going to meet up with Jupiter at the first degree, so 0 degrees of Aquarius. And generally, when there's a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, there tends to be a bit of a boost in the housing market or the economy. Things tend to improve. So I've always had my eye on December as an improvement point, and I do think that things will steadily improve. Initially, I think we are going to see a bit more of this virus playing out, and as we know, we can't sort of the way that the model worked, the way that we're working with this, the growth of this virus. Though we're trying to flatten the curve, we are still getting the figures are still doubling every couple of days. They're doubling, so. It's just the way it's going to work because we're actually in a pandemic right now. So we just have to accept the fact that is still going to play out. We can't really do much about that. But, it's got to run its course. That's it. It's kind of, it's out the bag now. So it's kind of got to run its course. Yeah. And once, it has done, we're going to learn an awful lot from this. I do really feel like the healthcare system is going to benefit because I think that they're going to really see the value in it and actually understand that they really need to, put some more. I'm grateful for the NHS in this country. I know in the US they don't have anything like it. Yeah. So I don't know. They did have Obamacare, didn't they? But did that happen? I don't actually know.
I think it's kind of still there. Trump's just changed it. I think they do have some kind of. It's more than it was. Put it that way. I don't think it's like the NHS we have here, but it's getting more. It's in that direction, if you like. But the thing is, it's just a very different culture and different society in that place. So they really need to reform it to change it. So I don't think it's something that can happen overnight and please everyone in the country, if you know what I mean. But one thing about all this stuff that makes me laugh is I thought about a really cool meme that it could have. You could have someone with a tinfoil hat in their room, and all of a sudden everyone else has come running inside because they've been told they've got to stay inside, and all of a sudden they're sitting next to the tin hat man and thinking. Mate, now we're all the tin hat man. You know what I mean? It's like the one that's been sitting indoors with the tin hat. He's like, well, this is normal life to me. You're the guys that have having the wake up call. I'm the one that's been waiting for this. So it's quite funny. I've got that feeling from people that they're all looking towards the conspiracy theorists and going, what did you say was going to happen? It's kind of everyone's opening their mind, as you kind of said. They're having that kind of wake up call now. But we are heading towards that time. So is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
Well, just to say that, it does seem that we're stepping inside that Uranus-Neptune internet dimension that kind of got opened up in the early 90s. So, it does seem to be feeding in this kind of weird technological healthcare kind of thing. You know what, I guess one of the things that I've needed to do to keep myself sane during this period is to actually take a bit of a time out from technology because it's absolutely been doing my head in. There's been a lot of fear mongering on there, and I thought that we were going to have problems with Brexit. I thought that that's what, I thought we'd have some kind of, I don't know, some kind of healthcare thing going on. But I also thought that, we'd have a bit of austerity due to Brexit. So to be honest with you, I think that, it's taken us all by surprise, really, quite how big this coronavirus thing is. But I think it's really important to make sure we look after our mental health and to take time out from social media and from anything that might scare you or make you feel anxious, and to just remember that this is part of a big cycle, and it's been round before and it's going to come round again in years and years and years to come. And I just think that I take a little bit of solace in the fact that this is so much bigger than us, so much bigger than me as an individual. And you know what? The other thing that's really interesting is it's called coronavirus, which corona is crown, and crown is kind of like that royal regal thing, which you can associate with Capricorn. So I think it's quite interesting that we're going through this awakening of the crown in ourselves as individuals. So don't forget to put some importance on looking after yourself and maintaining your own head.
Maybe us Capricorns are going to have developed superpowers or something, and that we'll sort it all out.
I think actually, since we've had Saturn in our sign, and we've also had Pluto since 2008 and Saturn since 2017, we have been given a type of resilience. And you talked about a meme the other day. I saw something on social media that said, that weird moment when you realise that your normal lifestyle is called quarantine, because literally since I've moved, I've not really I've been so sucked into astrology land and doing all the things that I do. My life has literally been totally unaffected. Like, apart from being able to see my family and travelling back to see my friends and stuff like that, my life has not changed. I'm literally living the same sort of life, really. So, I do think we've been given a kind of, not necessarily a shield. I mean, Jupiter in Capricorn does have a sort of protective bubble. And let me just say that with any kind of transit where Jupiter's involved, Jupiter can magnify it and blow it out of proportion. But there is an element of protection with Jupiter as well. Yeah. So I do think that maybe some of us Capricorns have actually got a little protective bubble around us at the moment.
Cool. I don't feel the fear like everyone. I've obviously got concern, and there's loved ones that in my life that I'm worried for. But I said to a friend the other day, I don't feel I see a lot of fear around me. I just don't feel it. But whether it's because I've been so into this kind of stuff for a long time anyway, so that now I'm kind of, it's kind of something that I expect to happen at any time to a degree. But I think it is healthy. As I said in another show, fear doesn't do anyone any favours. It doesn't make you intelligent. You gotta be scared enough to be sensible and to know the dangers, but not an overdose on it, because it doesn't do anyone any favours. It makes you selfish. It makes you unintelligent. Don't let the fear get hold of you. No.
But also, just remember that if we all deal with things in our own way, and I've seen a lot of people saying there's two types of people in this world. There's people that shrink and there's people that grow, and the people that shrink go out and buy all the toilet paper. And do you know what? Like, everybody's trying to deal with this in their own way, and as long as you're trying to you come from a good place. Just remember that you're a human going through, let me use the cliche word, unprecedented times. This is not a regular time on planet Earth. We are dealing with something pretty big, and nobody knows what they're doing. So let's just remember that and just forgive yourself for
a bit humble.
Just don't give yourself a hard time. Basically, that's what I have to tell myself.
No, so, and I agree with you. It's been great talking to you as well. We are just about at the end. We've got to wrap it up. It'd be great. I mean, obviously, there's going to be so much stuff unfolding over the coming weeks and months, and as you say, years. So please come back on the show again when you've got some more updates and more information that you can read for us and to sort of unfold. It's fascinating to listen to it from that perspective, and it just reminds us that there's more out there in the cosmos. It's definitely interesting. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And just so you know, I had so much more in my slides, but we don't have enough time on the show to go through any of it. Maybe talking over the coming weeks and other part 2 if you can. That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Take care.